early, he went back to Naas and ended up being the editor of the Leinster Leader. And he just asked me would I do a column for him, weekly column, and
Was it
it
called
just
Lily
kind of
White in
grew.
London or Kildare Man in London or something like that?
No, it was more kind of there was a lot of kind of nostalgia in it, I
Oh,
suppose,
that's
from
right.
growing
Yeah,
up.
memories. Yeah, that's right. I remember reading it. Yeah.
Yeah, growing up in Naas in the 80s, and like I suppose we covered every bar and nightclub and 80s, 90s, 2000s, and
Yeah,
yeah, I really, really
wasn't it?
enjoyed doing it.
Was Nijinsky's mentioned?
I'd say it was mentioned more than once.
Because I had just been talking to some of my friends and my sister about the possibility of doing an episode on Nijinsky's.
I think it's a great idea because I think, with those columns like Nijinsky's or the Bauhaus or
Yeah.
a column about the Ambo, like I suppose it was like they were all kind of part of like growing up and like I suppose coming of age or whatever you want to call it for so many of us. And I
But the
suppose
thing, I
people
think
really,
the geographical location of Nijinsky's was what's fairly bizarre as well, because it was sitting in the middle of the Curragh with nothing beside it. So if you're 18 or 17 or even 16 and you get into this nightclub with fake ID and then at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're stranded in the Curragh.
I know, yeah, yeah, yeah. No mobile phone or anything to try and get home, and
You have to walk to Newbridge and use the phone box,
yeah,
as I
sounds like
did.
you've done that.
Yeah. So this most recent, just you are doing some work with Sky, and through your work with Sky, you've done this podcast called, if I mispronounce this, Polonium, is it? Polonium?
That's it, yeah.
Polonium and the piano player. Is Polonium the poison, or is it the name of a person, or what?
Polonium's the name of the poison. It's
Okay. I did listen to the podcast. I
uh,
just couldn't remember the name of the poison.
yeah.
Tell us
No,
about.
listen.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean it just kind of came out of again, the kind of Derek Conlon is the subject of the story. He's a fantastic musician and piano player, lives in London. And I heard about his story about 5 years ago that he was caught up in the poison of Alexander Litvinenko, who was an ex-KGB officer who was poisoned with this uranium-based polonium in a five-star London hotel by two secret Russian agents in 2006.
That's right.
And I suppose I couldn't understand why, again, there wasn't kind of more about Derek Conlon's side of the story, because and this isn't giving anything away, but he essentially drank out of the same coffee cup that was used to poison Litvinenko. So this coffee cup had this uranium-based poison, and essentially like it was kind of radioactive poured into it.
So,
And
while I was listening, I couldn't figure out how it was just him that drank from the cup. Was it something to do with the dishwasher not working right or something like that? Or
yeah, Derek was playing he was booked to play the piano bar at the Millennium Hotel on the same afternoon that Litvinenko met the two Russian secret agents there. So unbeknownst to Litvinenko, the guys were carrying a kind of small vial of this poison. And Litvinenko had become an enemy of the Russian state. And so the boys poured this vial of poison into his cup of tea. He drank this, they left. Waiter came, cleared away the table, put the cup into the dishwasher. 10 minutes later, Derek Conlon comes in to begin his shift, orders a cappuccino before he starts. And I suppose kind of sheer bad luck or whatever, he
yeah,
ended up having his cappuccino made in the same cup. Now the dishwasher was broken, and because this substance is so strong, it's like one of the
it's
kind of
crazy
most
stuff. I mean, you go
yeah.
into it in the podcast. The power of this stuff. It's really scary.
Yeah, so I think once he put that kind of cup to his lips, the readings, the radiation readings off the cup were like off the scale, like they
Yeah,
couldn't be measured. So essentially, the story then is he has this poisoning him as well as Litvinenko, and because the British police and MI6 were kind of acting on the theory that whoever poisoned Litvinenko, because this material, this poison was so unstable, and they were acting on the theory that whoever carried out the poisoning would have this poison in them as well.
Yes.
So when Derek Conlon tested positive for polonium in his urine, he kind of became not only kind of victim of the attack, but also kind of unwittingly a suspect.
Which had huge psychological effect on him, I imagine.
Yeah, because the British authorities kind of were treating him with suspicion, as well as kind of trying to treat him as a victim. So he kind of had very little support. He kind of had nowhere really to turn. He believed with good grounds that his flat in North London was bugged.
Yeah.
But then
by the British or by the Russians?
Yeah, because he, it was always in the back of his head that he was potentially a witness to this kind of hit that was like sanctioned by the Russian state. So, and he was just the most unlikely guy. He's kind of an unassuming.
I think that's what's charming about the podcast too, or what's interesting about the podcast. I think the vision for me, and we'll choose not to give away anything in this particular one because it's quite current and it's just been released in the last few weeks. But that image of him playing piano, drinking cappuccino, it's like, the furthest away from Cold War style stuff than you'd ever imagine.
Yeah. No, listen. Thanks for saying that, because that's kind of how we felt about it as well. It was kind of those worlds just don't fit together, a world of music and piano bars and kind of soft furnishings and like dim lighting and with this crazy world of espionage and poisonings and murder.
And come here, were you afraid?
No, because the story's been out there so long, I think the biggest challenge about that story was really the narrator, Diana. She's the Sky News Moscow correspondent, and it was a real consideration for her to get involved in the story because she's in Moscow and because the Litvinenko story, it's still a kind of hands-off story in Russia, and you want to be kind of very careful if you're a journalist in Russia, kind of when you're talking about the Litvinenko case. But we did have conversations with other people in Russia who we thought might be good people to narrate it in the first instance, and they just weren't comfortable doing it because they were Russians themselves. But no, and it was.
I'm sensing that you were more excited than scared.
Yeah, I think it's. Yeah, I kind of didn't feel that. I suppose I felt probably some duty of care to Derek, but he was kind of very comfortable with it. But also, I found a KGB agent who lives in North London, and it took a few days to try and track him down and meet him, and when he arranged to meet, at kind of South Harrow tube station in North London.
And was he wearing a long coat?
He gave me a time and an entrance at the station to be at, and sure, listen, it was kind of a great thrill to be going to take it off from home, going to meet kind of an ex-KGB agent.
I was listening to Conversations on the Cold War. It's our Cold War Conversations is a podcast about the Cold War, and I personally just find it completely like addictive listening to stuff about the Cold War and that period. I'm just fascinated by it. But again, this current podcast is about this period, this post-Soviet period. And I think that another thing that the podcast did for me was just remind me that, stuff like that happens still to a certain extent.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And kind of truth stranger than fiction and all that type
like
of stuff.
looking at America, and I don't know if you've seen the recent depiction of the Trump thing that Sky Atlantic did with Brendan Gleeson. I don't know if you've seen it, but
No, and my mum was talking about it, and I've heard a few other people talking about it as well.
yeah, it just reminds me of the role that Russia can still play. And is that something that you became aware of by doing the podcast? It's like, yeah, Russia still has their powers.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you kind of, just when you're reading the papers, and watching the news, you kind of know that. I suppose you know that anyway.
Mm.
And I suppose for me, I probably don't dwell on those kind of bigger things. It's kind of the personal story
Yeah,
within the story. So it's kind of really just Derek's story, trying to get that right, trying to make sure, like, we tell it we do a good job of it, I suppose.
yeah.
As
And again,
opposed
there's a sense.
to,
I guess there was a bit of a very sensitive area to be going in with Derek's life, and him maybe getting on with his life now and not wanting to go back there, and you kind of pricking at him to try and get the details of the story. It might have been quite sensitive, was it?
yeah, because I tried to kind of get him in 2015 to kind of tell it in full. Now I did kind of manage to mark his story in a kind of RT doc on one that we did about Russia about 5 years ago, but he kind of wasn't at a stage where he felt entirely comfortable kind of
Yes.
talking about the entire story. So it was kind of one that I kind of put to one side and thought I'd love to kind of get a go at that again in the
Yeah.
future. Then,
Well, it's brilliant. I've been really enjoying it, and well done on that. And I just wanted to talk to you about. You're welcome. About the podcast genre and about radio in general. And you're in this situation where you're co-producing stuff with the likes of Sky and Documentary and One for RTE. How is that for you? Do you find certain limitations on certain subject matters that you've got a hunger to document, or is it a beneficial thing to have that platform?
Sure. Listen, it's an amazing privilege, it's an amazing privilege to have access to those platforms and to be able to kind of tell a story like Derek Conlon's story, or to do the Nobody Zone, and for RT to kind of commit resources to it and bring
Yeah.
in a kind of Danish production company. So
as regards to the production end of the podcast you're involved in, can you just kind of step away from that a little bit and just concentrate on the story and the interviews?
Not really on the Nobody Zone, yeah, because most of the production work on that was done by Third Ear, who are kind of Danish producers who are amazing. They're really, really kind of great.
Would you have any concerns, about about how you hear it in your head and how at the end how it ended up? Not having complete control. Is that something that bothers you? Or?
No, probably because I was kind of trained by the RT.com guys who are kind of really experienced and kind of good at what they do. And over the years, I've come to kind of trust them completely in terms of their judgments. And yeah, of course, there'll be disagreements on things, but I think like they're really kind of solid, experienced pros, and you'd never be surprised by anything that's in the final cut, or if you did feel strongly about something, there'd be a forum to kind of talk about it, and kind of it's very kind of
it's
very democratic, I suppose.
Democratic, yeah. And the way the documentary on One works, because I love the documentary on One, and I love that it's now on my Spotify as opposed to trying to catch it on the radio when I can or whatever, and I can just go through one episode after another. But does the documentary on One work like people submit ideas, like anybody from anywhere submit ideas, or is there a panel, or what way does it work?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I think it's great the way they do it, because they put out a call at the end of kind of every episode or every doc on One saying, if you have an idea or if you think you have a story, please email it in.
Yeah.
And then
they take it from
the
there.
editorial team, they kind of filter them through them, and
yeah.
best idea wins, which I think is great, because
Yeah.
I know some of the most successful doc-on ones are like from members of the public who just have that one story in them. And
Usually, yeah, you hear some of them that are, I was related to such and such a person that got shot in the War of
yeah,
Independence, or
and I think it's something more organizations should